This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. The threatened massive roundup of illegal immigrants by government agents failed to materialize this past weekend, at least on the scale promised by President Trump. Officials in major U.S. cities said there were few arrests. Gary Lane is following the story and joins us in the CBN newsroom with more. Gary?
Heather, ICE agents plan to arrest about 2,000 people, all illegal immigrants, ordered deported by federal judges. But they received notice from the president and immigration rights groups that the raids were coming on Sunday. So should the president have kept the raids secret? He told reporters Friday there was nothing to keep secret.
If the word gets out, it gets out, because hundreds of people know about it. It's a major operation. So if the word gets out, it gets out. It starts on Sunday, and they're going to take people out, and they're going to bring them back to their countries, or they're going to take criminals out, put them in prison, or put them in prison in the countries they came from. We're focused on criminals as much as we can.
Many illegal immigrants decided to hide inside their homes and elsewhere. "I take a chair and place it behind the door," said this woman. And as a result, very few arrests took place. Trump supporters say so far the number of illegal immigrants deported by President Trump are far lower than during most years of Barack Obama's presidency. But that fact didn't prevent demonstrations against Trump's deportation policy to follow the law. Several protests took place over the weekend in major cities around the country. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
Disrupting families who are just here trying to live their life, that's not who we are or should be as Americans.
At an ICE detention center in Colorado, demonstrators replaced an American flag with a Mexican flag. And in Washington state, a man was shot and killed by police after throwing incendiary devices at an immigration center. Acting Commissioner of Customs and Border Patrol Mark Morgan defended the raids, saying ICE agents are only doing their jobs.
In this case, their priority has always been, and it will be, to go after those that are criminal aliens, meaning those people who are here illegally and have committed additional crimes against American citizens.
Heather, we'll have to wait and see just how extensive those raids may be. We may know more by the end of this week, but they may not be as high profile as expected. ICE may just be doing what it has been doing all along, enforcing the law that members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans together, have passed under previous administrations, previous Congresses. So back to you in the studio.
All right, Gary, thank you. And today, the Trump administration announced a new immigration rule. It says that asylum seekers who pass through another country first will not be eligible for asylum at the U.S. southern border. For more on this, we're joined now by World Relief's Matt Soerens, who consults with churches around the country on matters of immigration. Matt Soerens, thank you for joining us today. I want to ask you about this new rule, which was just announced today. How do you expect to see it impacting those who come to the border or who are trying to come to the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to overstate just how significant a change this would be. And I do think we should expect some court challenges, and it's very possible that this will be struck down by the courts sooner rather than later. But this will affect a lot of people from Central America in particular, but from other countries as well, who have tried to get to the United States to request asylum, as U.S. law presently allows them to do, because they say they have a well-founded fear of persecution for particular reasons under the law. And for many of them, they're going to be, if this goes forward, they'll be ineligible, no matter how good their claim to persecution is, if they have not first filed for asylum in, for example, Mexico or that other second country that they've passed through on their way to the United States.
All right, and there's a lot of debate, of course, on legally what is going to happen with this. The ACLU, of course, is saying it's going to immediately challenge this in court. But yeah, even if it doesn't go through, do you think it might affect the word on the street, if you will, that people will say, hey, this is really not a good season to be coming to the United States?
That's certainly possible, and that might be part of the intention, even with something that I think the legality of this based on the law, Section 208 of the Asylum Immigration Nationality Act that governs asylum certainly makes this a questionable area. But perhaps part of it is to convey that message, which is concerning to us at World Relief because we think those asylum laws are actually really important. They're designed to ensure that our country provide refuge and protection for people who have a well-founded fear of persecution. And we've never said everyone should be granted it. It should be an appropriate legal process. But this basically closes the door to even having your case considered. I think of a young man who one of our World Relief offices in Southern California was able to serve with legal services recently from Cameroon in Africa, who had a very strong asylum case, made it all the way from Africa through South America, all the way up to the U.S.-Mexico border, was allowed in and eventually had his case approved. I mean, our government agreed that he had a well-founded fear of persecution. In his case, it was tied to being part of an English-speaking ethnic minority and some of the political issues there. He would presumably not be eligible to request asylum had this proposal been in place when he applied, because he passed through Mexico. But there's really good reasons that he and many others would prefer not to stay in Mexico. It's really not particularly safe, especially in some of those communities along the border.
Yeah, well, if this goes through, it would certainly be a dramatic change. I want to just ask you, too, briefly, because a lot of people are talking about this. The president is under fire for a tweet in which he told progressive Democrat congresswomen to, quote, go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. As someone who encourages Christians to love and support immigrants, how concerned are you about this type of rhetoric?
Yeah, I find it very concerning. I think it's important to understand that most of the members of Congress to whom he's apparently referring are native-born U.S. citizens. I mean, there isn't a place from which they came in terms of another country. They were born as U.S. citizens. And I think for a lot of Americans who don't have European ancestry like I do, it's very troubling to hear that maybe you don't belong here, even though you may have been here 3 or 4 or 5 generations, because you might look different. And I don't know if that's what the president's getting at. It's hard to know exactly what's in his mind. But it is a troubling sentiment, I think, that I'm very concerned for. And concerned for the people I know who, whether they're native-born U.S. citizens or naturalized citizens, who have dealt with questions of, but, why don't you go back to where you came from throughout their lives? Unfortunately, that's the sort of thing that a lot of people have heard more than once, and it can be really hurtful.
All right. Well, Matt Sorens with World Relief, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Heather.
In the aftermath of Tropical Depression Barry, flash flood watches have been in effect not only in much of Louisiana and Mississippi, but also in parts of Arkansas, eastern Texas, western Tennessee, and southeastern Missouri. Mark Martin brings us this look at the impact Barry has had on Louisiana.
Even though Tropical Depression Barry did not bring catastrophic flooding to Louisiana, many residents across the Gulf Coast are still advised to pay attention to tornado and flash flood warnings as the storm moves north.
Much of the southern portion of the state is still experiencing heavy rainfall that could lead to flash flooding. And we're at an elevated risk for tornadic activity.
Officials downgraded Barry to a tropical depression from a tropical storm on Sunday afternoon, but Edwards stressed it is still something to watch closely.
And so we continue to stress what we said yesterday, and that is not to let your guard down and become too complacent too soon. Remain vigilant and pay attention and watch the advisories that come out.
Edwards says he's extremely grateful Barry did not produce the devastating floods that forecasters predicted. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell also expressed relief.
We absolutely made it through the storm. Beyond lucky, we were spared. It seemed as those bands moved closer to New Orleans, it seemed to just go around us.
The Coast Guard did have to rescue people and pets from flooded areas south of New Orleans. A spokesperson says they rescued some from rooftops. Take a look at this video, which shows the Coast Guard airlifting a 77-year-old man with a dog after officials say his home took on 4 feet of water. This store owner in New Iberia, Louisiana, says Barry flooded his building with more than a foot of water, ruining furniture and computer equipment. Still, Governor Edwards says the main levees on the Mississippi River did not fail and were expected to hold up through the storm. PowerOutage.us reported more than 50,000 customers in Louisiana and more than 4,000 customers in Mississippi were without power early Monday. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Parents are protesting after photos surfaced of a drag queen story hour at a Portland, Oregon library. The story hour happened last year, and the photos now show children playing on the floor and lying on top of a man dressed as a woman. One parent wrote on a Facebook post about it saying, quote, "I wouldn't let my kids crawl on top of random strangers, no matter how said strangers are dressed." Drag queen story hours have been spreading as part of a nationwide LGBTQ agenda to influence children. CBN News attended one event where a gay man dressed up with an Under the Sea theme to read to children. He said doing so makes it more fun for the kids. Activist mommy Elizabeth Johnston says it is confusing and harmful for children.
Whatever happened to puppet shows and craft day at the library? Why do we need to bring in kiddie porn and tampon and Lucy fur to accommodate the 0.001% of the population?
Most libraries have responded to complaints by saying they want to be inclusive with their programs. For more on this story and Johnston's response, you can go to cbnnews.com. Well, in China, the latest chaotic protests against the country's leaders filled the streets of Hong Kong on Sunday. Protesters there are demanding the resignation of Hong Kong's chief executive, and they're calling for an investigation into alleged police violence. Complaints sparked after earlier demonstrations that police assaulted participants against the extradition law. The large-scale protests began in Hong Kong last month over a proposed legislation that would allow people in Hong Kong to be sent for trials in mainland China. Opposers to the bill say if passed, their legal rights would not be guaranteed. An independent report by the British government says that Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world, and persecution is still on the rise. The report's publication was marked in Rome on Monday by a meeting organized by the British Embassy to the Holy See in the Basilica of St. Bartholomew. The report found a variety of factors behind anti-Christian oppression, including aggressive nationalism and a rise of Islamist extremism.
The treatment of Christian minorities is a bellwether for how all minorities are treated. So if Christians suffer, that usually goes together with the abuse of human rights more generally. And he also says that Christians tend to speak truth to power, which can make them a particular focus of persecution. But he makes very clear that freedom of religion and belief, the universal human right, is for all, for everyone, as he says, without fear or favor.
The report recommends that Britain push for a UN Security Council resolution urging governments in the Middle East and North Africa to protect Christians and other persecuted minorities. Coming up, how one college Christian club is fighting back after being told they are no longer guaranteed a safe space on campus. And before we go to break, here is a look at what is trending right now on CBNnews.com.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. CBN News, no filter, 24/7 news. Through the lens of faith, from natural disasters to breaking news in the Holy Land. We have access to stars in entertainment and to top newsmakers. We are fighting for your freedoms. CBN News, because truth matters. Become a CBN News member today.
These days, faith-based clubs are no longer guaranteed a safe space on college campuses. The latest example, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at Wayne State University in Michigan. InterVarsity wants the ability to select leaders who share the ministry's beliefs, but Wayne State says that's discriminatory. InterVarsity is asking a federal court to make a decision in the case. And here to explain more is Lori Wyndham, senior counsel at Beckett. Beckett is a nonprofit law firm that supports free expression for all religious traditions. Lori, thanks so much for joining us. The university says InterVarsity leadership policy is discriminatory. What is your response to that?
This is absolutely not discriminatory. InterVarsity is just asking to do what other groups on campus have been doing for many years. They're merely asking to have leaders who share the same beliefs as the group they're leading. InterVarsity student leaders focus mainly on Bible study, prayer, and worship. They make a very simple request, which is that their Bible study leaders actually believe in the Bible. Whereas Wayne State has many other clubs who require that their leaders share their faith. The college Republicans can require their leader to be a Republican. The college Democrats can require their leader to be a Democrat. So I don't understand why it's suddenly a violation of university policy for InterVarsity to ask its Bible study leaders to believe the Bible.
The situation at Wayne State has been going on for some time. How has InterVarsity managed to conduct its ministry while this legal situation is playing out?
Well, this has really placed some difficulties on the university, on InterVarsity. When the university first kicked them off, they were kept out of the student organizations fair. They were actually forced to rent a table downstairs in a hallway, away from where all the other student groups were able to meet. They had to pay a fee every time they wanted to reserve a room for a Bible study. After this lawsuit started, Wayne State did the right thing and allowed InterVarsity back on campus. We were thrilled. Unfortunately, then they turned around and in federal court said that they had the right to kick InterVarsity off campus anytime. They said InterVarsity was violating the policy and they're asking the federal courts to uphold their rights to decide who gets to be a Christian student group's leaders.
Other faith-based groups on other college campuses have also had to fight non-discrimination policies. Is this case similar? Do you see the Supreme Court ultimately having to make a decision here?
I think the Supreme Court ultimately will have to step in here because it's some of its own decisions that have caused some confusion and led universities to do the wrong thing. This case is very similar to some other cases out there, most notably the University of Iowa first kicked off a Christian student group because of its religious beliefs and traditional Christian teachings about marriage, and then followed that up and kicked 40 other groups off campus, claiming that they were violating the university's policy. A federal court has ruled against them, and yet it's now under appeal to a federal appeals court. The University of Iowa still hasn't given up the fight, and so I'm really disturbed to see this trend that we're seeing around the country of universities who think that they get to decide who a religious group's leaders ought to be.
Lori Wyndham with Beckett, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Like a lot of media, German reporters are hostile to Donald Trump, so it is no surprise the American president is unpopular with the German people. U.S. Ambassador Richard Grenell is caught in the middle of this strained relationship. CBN News reporter Dale Hurd introduces us to the president's man in Germany.
It's no exaggeration to say that the German establishment and media cannot stand Donald Trump. And that means the president's ambassador in Berlin is not going to win any popularity contests. In fact, Richard Grenell may be the most unpopular U.S. ambassador to Germany since the Second World War. But it seems Trump's man in Berlin could not care less. He's here to do a job, and that job is to fix what some call a dysfunctional transatlantic relationship.
Those in Germany who don't like him, and there are a lot of them, call Richard Grenell the little Trump, because he believes in his message, he believes in President Trump, and he gives the Germans the undiplomatic truth.
You've had some rough treatment from the German media. They don't like you.
I would say there's some that do, but it doesn't bother me. I'm really focused on a job, and I recognize that in the short term, in the immediacy, that changing the status quo is always messy, that people get comfortable and they don't want to change the status quo. So I got good perspective. I'm a cancer survivor. And I have to tell you that when you wake up and you've defeated cancer and you're looking at life in a different way on a daily basis, bad media coverage or critical media coverage or complainers from the side, that doesn't bother me.
The hostility to Grenell has reached such a level that a German lawmaker asked the government to declare the American ambassador persona non grata and expel him from the country. But the former regular on Fox News' Red Eye program and advisor to 4 American UN ambassadors has made it clear he's not going to be a traditional quiet ambassador.
Well, first of all, they're always surprised that I'm a Trump supporter, which is quite funny to think that an ambassador wouldn't be. So yes, I think the coverage is inherently an assumption that an ambassador is supposed to give parties and not supposed to defend their country and not supposed to push forward.
On Grenell's hard-charging agenda is to get one of the world's wealthiest nations to stop being so cheap about its military spending. NATO requires its members to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. The Germans are still not even close.
Why is it so difficult for a rich nation like Germany to meet its NATO obligation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is really a demand of NATO that if you're going to be a NATO member, you need to have a working military. You need to have helicopters and transport planes and a military that works. So what we've seen in Germany is that they've got a broken military system. And if they're going to be a part of NATO, then they have to abide by the NATO rules.
Grenell really irked the Germans on day one as ambassador when he tweeted out a warning to German companies to not violate U.S. sanctions against Iran.
Companies are free to do business inside Iran. We're not telling them that they can't. What we are saying is, if you do business in Iran, you also can't do business in the United States.
In a nation that all but worshipped Barack Obama, most Germans do not like Donald Trump. Only 10% of Germans say they have confidence in President Trump to do the right thing. And that makes Grenell's job even harder.
Would you be willing to admit that the transatlantic relationship has been weakened because of some of the tough talk President Trump has used with the Europeans?
No, I don't think so. I think that the transatlantic relationship has been strengthened by President Trump's talk, his directness, even his tweets, because what's happening is that we're stopping a slide of the status quo.
And if the German-American relationship is in need of an intervention, Richard Grenell seems like the man for the job.
I make no apologies for pushing America. I work for the American taxpayer. I work for the American government, the American people, and for President Trump. I don't work for the Germans. I look at the relationship with the Europeans, and specifically the Germans, as one in need of reform, and we're doing the messy work of reform.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, Berlin.
Have you ever been on it?
After the break, what a new study says about a mother's spiritual influence over her children.
Give me that. Bye.
Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
A new study out reveals that it is a mother's influence that often guides a child's spiritual walk. The report by the Barna Group found that 68% of people said it was their mother's faith that influenced them versus 46% for fathers. Other data collected found 37% say it was their grandparents who influenced their faith development, while 16% reported it was a non-relative and 14% said it was a friend. The study also found that 59% said they were Christians as an adult because a member of their household passed down their faith. And that is it for us. Thanks so much for staying with us. We'll see you next time.